Hello, everyone, and welcome to this recorded session on the Common App. My name is Mackie Siebens. I'm the Director of Admission at Bard College. And again, we're here to talk to you a little bit about the Common App. We're going to be taking apart pieces of the Common application, talking to you a little bit more about how you can leverage those when you're thinking about what information to include when you're applying to college, where to put in some specific stories, some specific pieces of information about yourself, and how to really use the Common App to your advantage. So again, as I said, my name is Mackie Siebens. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Bard for the next couple of seconds to give you an understanding of where we are. We're in New York State. We're about 90 miles, an hour and a half north of New York City. We're on a large 1,000-acre campus, huge, beautiful piece of property right on the Hudson River, overlooking the Catskill Mountains. And our campus is about 1,900 undergraduate students, all majoring in the liberal arts and sciences. So students major in the 4 divisions of the college: math, science, computing, languages and literature, the arts, and social studies. And we have a number of other kinds of study abroad programs and campuses outside the US as well. But I'm going to hand it over to John. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. John Eriksen. I'm the Director of at Johnson & Wales University with campuses in Providence, Rhode Island, and Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm based in Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in our country, sandwiched between Connecticut and Massachusetts. We have a university size of about 12,000 students with about 70 countries represented. And I look forward to talking with you and discussing the Common application as we go through the next 20 minutes with you or so. So, Louise?
Hello, everyone. My name is Louise Karneus, and I'm an Assistant Director of Admission at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. The town, so nice, they named it twice. Walla Walla is in Washington State, so in the Pacific Northwest, not Washington, D.C. We're actually on the opposite side of the country. Walla Walla is about a 40-minute flight from Seattle, Washington, and about a 90-minute flight from San Francisco. So while in a more rural location, it's really well connected to tech and business hubs on the West Coast. Whitman is a liberal arts college located at the heart of Walla Walla. We offer 47 majors total and an assortment of minors as well. All students come into the college undeclared, so you'll have a lot of time to chart your path after you arrive on campus, but that could look like something as between environmental studies, biology, astrophysics, sociology. There are a lot of different options here, in addition to some really cool study abroad programs, community fellowship programs, and on-campus research for all of our undergraduates.
So I'm going to get started right away with the Common application and where students will begin that process. You go to www.commonapp.org and begin the process of completing and starting your Common application. They're going to ask you for an email first, and use an email that is readily checked by yourself as you go through and applying to a number of colleges and universities. It's great to have maybe one email that you use for all of these applications, because that's the primary way a lot of universities will stay in touch with you over this process. This email for the Common App will also serve as your login, and you'll create a unique password to access your account. And you'll get started with the application process itself and filling out bio information. I think the first part of it is your address. Physical address, and it helps you with selecting a country first of where you're located, and then as you progress through the details of your address, it'll self-populate, but there is an option if your address doesn't show, and I know that a lot of students are concerned with that around the world and whether or not your address is actually populated within this Common App format. And there is a way to kind of just go ahead and have a free flow answer for yourself rather than it's selecting. So there's an option for that. You're going to talk as well about your citizenship and just your name and details like that. Please use your official names as used on your passport and documents, because later in the process, universities will use that as your official name, and it's very important that all the applications that you send out, that you use that name that's on your passport and the official government name. The next part is where you start to fill in some other details about your educational system, your guidance counselor, and make sure you're filling in those details accurate as well, because as we go through later parts of the Common App and receiving documents through that on the university end, you need to make sure that you're using the right guidance counselor emails for uploading of those transcripts. So accuracy is key as we go through this part, and making sure that you're using government and official details to fill out the Common Application. The next part is where you kind of get into some supplemental details and writing your application essays. And my colleague Louise is going to spend some time now talking about that essay part.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, John. So the Common Application essay, I think it feels as though there's a lot of weight on you in creating a piece of really strong writing to supplement your application, whereas so much of what John just talked about, so much of your high school experience has kind of come to a close or is coming to a close as you're filling out this application. The essay is something totally new that you will write just for these purposes. The Common Application essay has a limit of 650 words, and there are many prompts which you can now find on the Common Application. One of the prompts is create your own prompt, so conceivably you can write this essay on anything. And actually, I think that makes it more stressful rather than less stressful. My advice for choosing a topic would be go with your gut once you have something that you are excited to write about. I think that it's important for you to follow an impulse, follow that impulse. This essay, 650 words, is simply not enough space to, prove and chart out the rest of your life to completely summarize who you are even at this time. So oftentimes some of the best essays are crafted from topics that are smaller, more specific to you, projects that you've worked on, relationships that mean quite a lot to you. The prompts can help you choose a good angle for your essay, a good prompt that will work for you yourself. But remember that you shouldn't feel too pressured to fit this into a certain mold, right? Make sure that it is polished, make sure that it is clear of distracting typos and errors. But one really important aspect of the essay is that you should be able to have a friend read it, a teacher, maybe even a family member, and they should be able to recognize your voice within this essay. So choosing a topic that you're excited to write about is really important for that. Another really important part of the essay is that you don't need to use the Common Application personal essay, as a place to explain away any other part of your application. There are many other spaces actually on the Common Application that are not this essay, which are still kind of free form spaces for you to write out some things, to write out some explanations. The additional information section is great for this. The best way for a student to use the additional information section is sometimes to not use it at all. Maybe you don't really feel as though you have anything to add to your list of extracurriculars. Maybe you don't have any special explanations that you'd like to attach to your application. However, if there is something unique or distinctive about your extracurriculars, about your school system, about your high school experience, or just more information about you biographically, personally, that you would like us to know, the additional information section is a perfect space for that. Additional information does not need to be one cohesive essay. You can have a list, you can have bullets of parts of your application, other parts of your application that you would like to address. You can talk through your school's curriculum in more detail. You can share a little bit more about your college search or why you'd like to go to college in the United States. It is a free and open section, and you shouldn't feel pressured to use it or fill it up. But rather than writing your personal essay about something that you feel as though you must address in order to help us understand your application, that's a really good use of the additional information section. This year, there will be a specific COVID question on the Common Application as well. So this is yet another spot, right, where you can talk about the ways in which this global pandemic has impacted your education, your life. It has impacted all of us to varying degrees. And this question is kind of another way to keep the rest of your application still focused on you, your personal goals. But this is the spot specifically just to talk about how the past year has been going for you. There are also some other parts on the Common Application that are meant for writing. Again, all of this writing should be coherent, should be proofread. Some of the pieces like a gap year or educational change, if it doesn't seem super familiar familiar to you and to your education system, the Common Application does skew a bit towards the US educational system, so you may not have anything to write there. But when it comes to talking about a gap year, right, just making sure that you're being clear and concise about what you've been doing since you graduated from high school. When there's an opportunity to talk about any educational shifts, again, being clear and concise, strong in that writing, but realizing that you don't need to tackle all of what I just talked about in the personal essay. That's still a space for you, and the Common Application has a lot of spots for you to provide further context on yourself as an applicant.
Thanks, Louise. I'm going to jump over to extracurriculars. So a couple questions that college admission counselors often get about this particular section in the Common Application are things like, what if I don't fill up all the spaces that there are to fill out your extracurriculars? And especially this year, what if I can't continue with some of the extracurriculars and activities I've been doing before COVID? Will that reflect poorly on my application? And some other questions like, what kinds of things should I include on the extracurricular or activities section, sort of what counts as that extra activity. So I'm happy to dive into some of these to give you a better understanding of how to use this section. You should absolutely be putting in things that you're passionate about. Maybe there are some of the more traditional activities. Maybe there's sort of a sports component. Maybe you're on a sports team or a member of a league of some kind. Maybe you're a musician. Maybe you're an artist. Those may be some of the more traditional things that you'd expect that most schools sort of offer in one way or another, but something that you'll hopefully get a sense of throughout this entire presentation is just how much we want you to be open and honest about your personal experience. We're reading you in the context that you're applying to us from, and the extracurricular session allows us to basically see exactly how you like to spend your time and what has been offered to you. So in this particular moment, we totally understand that some activities you'd be participating in school have been closed down for those that are being taught remotely or are being taught in such a way that you aren't able to communicate with students in person and sort of spend time doing some of the things you used to do before COVID-19. We are not going to penalize you in any way for a shift in your activities. This is something that we're all facing in some way. We're all facing these challenges, these life shifts. And so it's really important for you to understand that we're not going to see that you stopped doing something last year in the spring and weren't able to continue it and sort of think that that's sort of a lack of interest or something else. It's not going to reflect poorly at all. We do hope that you will find ways to innovate and find ways to connect and find ways to continue doing the things that you really like. So if you have been able to do that, we'd love to see that in the extracurricular section. Some students do lots of different things and maybe dabble and explore lots of different things, and so they do fill up the section. Some students are dedicated to just a handful of things that are really important to them. And as long as we sort of see that context underneath the activity, you'll be able to provide a couple of sentences, your involvement, maybe why this is really important to you, what kind of skills you've developed, what you really love about this particular activity or extra. That can lend itself well to the application. That can give us a little bit of context into why you are exploring something for just 1 year or just one term of school, or why you've been doing something for a really long time. That's really important. So try to include that context where you can. And then moving on from that, I want to be clear too that our priorities may have changed during COVID, and yours might have as well. Maybe you are now living with an elderly family member and taking care of them. Maybe your parents have picked up work shifts or have changed jobs or have lost their jobs, and that lends itself to you taking care of a younger sibling or you having to get a job yourself if you don't already have one. And I want to be clear that all of those kinds of family and job responsibilities are extras. Those are things that you spend time doing outside of the classroom. So please do include those in your extracurricular activities section. We want to know how you spend your time, what's important to you, and especially what's important to you now during COVID and what responsibilities you might have had to take on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John to talk about transcripts.
I think it's a good time to talk about the Common App in a way that there are some things that are required that go out to all the different colleges and universities and standard questions. And then there are some additional requirements that might be set by each institution. And how do you as a student keep maybe all of this straight as you're going through the process? And there's a dashboard that will show up within your Common App profile, where you're able to see what details of the application are still needed for each particular institution that you're applying to. So they'll provide a list, as you go through these applications, and you can kind of see where are you in that process with the various pieces that are required of this application. So we're going to shift gears a little bit in that we were talking about some qualitative parts of the application in Mackie and Louise, just talking about these areas as extracurricular activities and essays. I'm going to talk a little bit about that transcript piece, a little bit more on the quantitative part of the application, where we're able to review your academic credentials. Certainly they've changed as well, because of COVID, and we're aware of that as institutions, and we're quite flexible with the various formats and the changes that have taken place within your country. And most notably, we noticed with the IB program had some changes with the way they scored their exams this year, and also the Cambridge testing, the IGCSE, the GCSEs also had changes to them, and their grades came out similar, but with some differences. And I think we're aware of that as those that read applications as part of our jobs at the university, to evaluate these credentials and transcripts and understand what they mean for you and what they mean for the school and country that you're applying from. There are a lot of changes in diversity, not only within one educational system, but when you start to look at all the different countries around the world, there's a lot of diversity within the way transcripts and grades are given to students. And we as international admissions staff, we're able to evaluate these transcripts and look at how you've done within your system of education, and more specifically within your school, and how you've done within that. So not only do we look at the transcripts, we also want to see a profile of your school if available, because we'll do research, on the educational system, your school, how many students will go off to tertiary education, what's the grading scale used, and maybe even a quartile or a ranking system that's done within your school with those students. A lot of times when we're looking at international schools and schools within India or let's say Southeast Asia, there might be some national systems where the profile might not be available to send, but then we'll rely on those experts within country through either Education USA offices or our network of guidance counselors that we work with around the world to understand the context about these grades that are sent off to the university. These transcripts are sent, uploaded typically through the Common application. There's a way for you to indicate your guidance counselor or principal to upload these documents and transcripts. So you would, as I said earlier on in the accuracy, make sure you put the accurate email for your guidance counselor and they'll be able to upload it, or there are a lot of different transcript kind of systems, IT systems that are in place that upload directly to the Common App as well through the various schools' own IT systems and transcript document imaging systems. When it comes to another way to send a transcript in, some universities will accept transcripts by email or through a unique URL that is secure for you to upload documents. So you can also reach out to your university that you're applying to if they happen to be missing that transcript that they need to evaluate. The transcript is a key part of your application, and it's something I think we as international admissions officers look at substantially in this piece of the application. Credentials typically will come to us as copies at first, and part of the enrollment process at a lot of universities in the US, you'll be able to show the original copy at point of entry to the university at times. So there are a couple different ways. Typically, students will ask us how to send those transcripts, and most will come through the Common App, but then there's additional ways, either through email or upload, as I mentioned, to get those transcripts to us. At this point, we're going to continue a little bit more on the quantitative part, and I'll pass it off to Louise to talk about testing.
Thank you so much. One trend, as you can probably imagine, that's coming up a lot is various processes that have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. SAT and ACT standardized testing have very much been impacted. And we know that many students are in a place where they're unable to take these tests, unable to retake these tests. And that feels like a lot of pressure. That's definitely a difficult spot to be going into the college application process. One thing I want to first emphasize is that all three of the institutions presenting today are test optional. Not only that, we've been so for many years. So as you're researching options for test submission in various colleges, do always look into college policies, right? Many colleges are already test optional, and most colleges are planning on being test optional or even test blind for the coming cycles. So before I kind of continue talking, do take a deep breath, realize that we are aware of all the situations impacting test scores, and this does go for English proficiency testing as well, though in many cases those tests are a bit more flexible and will allow for at-home options, looking at what English proficiency exams each college requires or will accept is also going to be an important part of this process. But in terms of unpacking what test optional actually means, I think that all three of us are really well equipped to talk about it. We have been test optional, as I said, for many years. And one question that we all get a lot because of this is kind of the question where we're assuming that two completely identical students have applied to a college and one has testing and one is test optional. Who is more likely to be admitted? That's a question that I know I get a lot, and the answer is that situation would never actually happen. There are no two identical applicants in the world. Even if you had an identical twin who had done all of the exact same things as you would still have different essays, you would still have different applications. So ultimately, these decisions are not going to come down to test scores, especially at test optional institutions, but I mean, in most cases, it is just another data point. We're not relying on this. It's definitely not a holistic metric of success. We have so much else to go off of from the rest of the application. So hoping that puts a little bit less pressure on the process. You should still be well versed in schools' test requirements, schools' various test optional policies. Occasionally a college will require a sort of portfolio or an additional supplement in lieu of test scores. Do keep those requirements do keep them untangled by college. And as you go into this season, realize that it's different, that we understand that it's different. And if you do have questions about how test optional might impact you, questions about, which scores to submit or which scores to withhold, we are always happy to talk things through. With that, I'm going to pass things off to Mackie to close things off with discussion about letters of recommendation, one of the many more holistic metrics of success that I'm glad we get to finish on.
Sure. Thanks, Louise. So briefly, I want to talk about recommendation letters. Most colleges will ask you to submit several different kinds at BARD, and I think shared with other institutions. One letter usually comes from a counselor or an advisor, someone who isn't necessarily a teacher, though they could also double as a teacher, of course, but someone who has served in an advisory or mentorship kind of role. And then the other two would come from teachers, usually one, if you can, in two different subjects, two different fields. So generally that's 3 in total, but do check what is required for different colleges and universities. They might require different kinds of letters or different numbers of letters. So definitely take a look at that. But generally speaking, a counselor and then 2 teacher recommendations is probably a good way to start. And then when you're thinking about who to ask, for recommendation letters, obviously this is up to you. You're asking your teachers to provide a letter of recommendation as you apply, which usually gets sent along with your common application. And I would think obviously about the classes that may be the most obvious, the ones that you excel in, the ones you really enjoy, the ones that you're passionate about. But you might also want to consider if you have struggled in a particular class, and perhaps even more so if that's reflected in your transcript. If you have a wobble, if you have some kind of lower grade in a class, and you have worked through it, you've persevered, and you've either worked with a teacher or you've continued to work on the material, and maybe you've just improved a lot in that class, you might want to think about asking a teacher who has seen growth, who's seen you move through challenges, who can really speak to that part of you that has been driven through a particular challenge or a trickier subject that doesn't come to you as naturally. So you might want to also consider that. Supplemental information, which I'm actually going to talk about next, that could be a recommendation letter from someone who maybe was a mentor outside of school, or maybe you do a program that's not related to your school. Maybe you did a job or internship or something and would like your employer to write a letter of recommendation. You can include those. Those can be included in supplemental information. Do bear in mind that while we do a holistic read and we read all of these applications carefully, if you add a lot more information, it may get a little bit diluted, and we really want to make sure you're thinking carefully about putting your best foot forward and thinking intentionally about what material you're going to include. So I wouldn't include another 5 different letters of recommendation, but certainly if there's someone that's important to you in your life who doesn't fit the counselor-teacher role, you can certainly include that. Moving quickly on, just to finish with portfolios and supplemental information. Some schools do require portfolios. If you're applying to, say, an art school or a music school, you may have to audition or may have to have a professor or someone review your portfolio. At our institutions, that's generally not the case. You are applying to our college as a whole, and you end up declaring your major later down the road. So you actually have time to explore, to maybe step outside your comfort zone and take on additional classes. But if you are going to submit photographs, if you're going to submit an essay that you wrote and you're proud of, if you're going to submit artwork or music or a clip of you performing in a theater show, you could also do that by uploading it to supplemental information. So definitely think about that. Usually the formats that you can upload materials to are quite diverse. You could submit, as I said, videos, still images, music, those kinds of things, and generally they're pretty flexible. So again, think carefully about what you want to include. Don't send us everything that you've done in the last 4 years or 5 years. Think really carefully about what you really have enjoyed, what sort of identifies your key strengths and the things you really love. So I will end there, and I want to thank you all for tuning into this recording about the Common application. I can say on behalf of John and Louise that we hope it's been useful, and we hope that you've had some questions answered through this session. The next slide will have our names and emails on it, so if you want to learn a little bit more about our institutions, you'll wait for the next slide, and you'll be able to contact us using the information there. So thanks very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure. All right, bye.